Texas!
He's a 10.
I choose this family.
Hey guys, and welcome to episode 61 of 911 Lone Star Roundup. I'm one of your hosts, EJ, and with me today are my lovely co-hosts, Katie.
Hey guys.
And Grace.
Hi, everyone.
Today we will be talking about season 3, episode 13 of 911 Lone Star, titled Riddle of the Sphinx, though honestly, it should have been called Tarlos, as Ronan said.
This was a very much Tarlos episode.
Yes, it is. Anyways, there's a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump into it. We might not talk too much about certain things that happen, just so we can focus on what we want to talk about.
Yeah, because let's be honest, everyone's listening to this for the Tarlos part, not anything else that happened in this episode. Not to diss anything else that happened in this episode, but
to a minor diss to some stuff that happened in this episode.
Let's just be honest, we're all here for Tarlos.
We are. So the episode starts with there's a car accident with a guy who has a whole bunch of hay on his truck. He didn't see her, he hit her, bunch of whole drama. It was really weird how they did it.
I think what happened actually was she swerved into his lane, and then that's what happened.
I don't know how the guy is okay, considering the angle of the truck. Part of me was like, okay, was he moving? Did she just swerve into him stationary? But no, then he wouldn't have been tipped over. Those things weigh a fucking ton. So, considering the fact that the vehicle is on its side and he's perfectly fine, I'm just what?
Unless he was going super slow, so it did it in slow-mo.
Also, was it just the trailer part that was jackknifed, or was the cab too?
I think it was just the trailer.
Okay, because that would explain it, even though you tend to think they'll both go, but sometimes it's just the one.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because the woman had hay fever, she had serious allergies to it, so she was injured, possibly with some spinal or neck injuries, and she started sneezing, which was
vertebrae, which could have sliced her spine.
Yeah, so it was very kind of rushed to get her out of the car because of that. And then as they're kind of cleaning up, they find a foot.
Mateo finds the foot. But can we talk about the hay fever? Because this reminds me last year when somebody was saying this isn't a realistic show because nobody has complained about pollen, and then Timonier's just wait.
Yeah, really. I know, right? Hey,
you will never hear anyone complain about pollen though in shows, let's be honest. I've never heard, just saying.
Well, it's true. I mean, I think
that's not me.
It's a thing there, a really common thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And initially the woman had thought she was swerving to miss a deer. Turns out she actually was swerving to miss a cyclist. So there was a guy underneath all that hay that had lost his
I know.
And so they had to start hunting through all the hay. What was it? Find a cyclist in a haystack.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
They found a bicycle.
Yeah. It is
I have a lot of questions about
I have a lot of questions about not to, just her. I'm sorry, when I drive, I'm scanning the road for people and stuff, especially this time of year when it gets nicer out. We're outside, people are outside.
I get
I'm sorry.
If you're more focused on swerving just because you realize something's there, you might not realize it's a person, but also the guy was wearing blue, a bright color. That was last I checked.
And it didn't look like they were on they looked like they were kind of not necessarily a rural road. It seemed like it was kind of a narrow road. So I'm why would she be out there? She looked like she was dressed for business, and he looked like he was on a farm. It looked like she had just driven down this random farm road. I'm bicyclists.
But the foot. So yeah, they find the foot and then
they put it on ice.
Yeah, Mateo's what am I supposed to do with this? And it's put it on ice.
Right. Yeah, put it on ice and they'll reattach it at the hospital.
And then so they're looking through the haystack, which I actually found to be pretty funny because it's just looking through the haystack aimlessly for this person. And
they have rake and they're raking aside the hay. And look, I get there's a okay, I get there is a way to do it, but rakes are sharp. There are points. You go a little too hard and you're causing a little more problems than before.
I did see the tongs up though. I did see. I was thinking the same thing, and I noticed that some of them that they were as they were going through, you could see the tongs were sticking up and not down.
Okay, what the one I noticed looked like the tongs were down, which I get. It's an efficient way of moving the hay, far better than your hands. But still, it's like if you're looking for a person,
right,
an injured person. But again, speed is priority, so maybe. I just had a slight farm girl moment of
right, and a little scratch from a rake is kind of small potatoes compared to a foot amputation from an accident.
That's true.
So then they find the dude, and he has I'm like, how is this guy alive?
He should not have been alive. He should not have been. He was under a lot of hate,
blood literally spurting from his leg very quickly. And I'm like, considering that they did not know about him at first, they were helping the woman at first, and they only learned about it as they were about like put her in the ambulance, so to speak. And I have so many problems because he should have bled out in a couple of minutes, and it most definitely took them what I'm guessing at least 10 minutes to search through that hay.
Oh yeah,
he should have been done.
I honestly, I don't know how quick like this all went, but I definitely don't think it was just like a 10-minute thing, like between like getting to her, travel time,
10 minutes after they started searching, so like a 10-minute search on top of everything else.
Like I would honestly guess maybe like between response times and that, possibly like 20-30 minutes by the time I got to him, which I'm just like, how is this guy alive?
Because there's nothing pressing on the wound. If there was something pressing on the room, if there was something stemming the blood flow, but there's nothing. There's hay. Hay does nothing, y'all.
It's so
except maybe infect the wound, which is probably the least of their worries. It's already pretty bad.
I mean, it's not sanitary at all, but
not sanitary. I mean, at least he wasn't like in a stall. That's where true. The hay most definitely would not have been sanitary.
Right.
But it's still not sterilized, y'all. So that's probably one of the only real pet peeves I have with this particular accident, because I don't have a problem with the accident necessarily. Like, it was engaging, it was funny at some parts, they do good work, but he shouldn't have been alive.
Right.
And I think shows are doing a little bit more of that lately. Like, they're making I get they have to not do everything they've already done, and so therefore they keep having to one up themselves. But I'm noticing an increase in they should have survived that. Or maybe that's just my like having gotten my certification, through their cross. Like, I'm noticing it more now, but still, I feel like it's growing.
It happens, and the thing is you can't like look at every single thing as like, oh, this or that. Like,
right. You have to suspend reality when you watch shows like this.
Even like,
I will still point out when it's unrealistic.
I know, but like, it's just like, I'm not gonna dwell on things forever, because like obviously it's not gonna be realistic, but it's as real as it can be.
Right. And so I think one of the funny moments was at the end. So just as they're getting ready, the guy's kind of getting loaded up and they're trying to figure that out. The ambulance starts to pull away, and Mateo realizes he still has the guy's foot in a bag on ice. He's like, what am I going to do with the fun's foot? So he has to run after to catch the ambulance to give him the foot.
That's a total move. Like, that's so Mateo.
Like, that is so Mateo. He's like, oh, what do I do with this? He's probably just been walking around.
And they're like yelling at him to run. Is the thing.
Yeah. So, but I hear what you're saying, Grace. It's definitely, but I think it's just this, we just realized we got to suspend reality. And I mean, we can call them out on their stuff, but
like I'll, as I said, as I'm saying here, like, I'll make a point about it, but like, we can move on. Like, that's fine. Speaking of which, let's move on.
Exactly. Yeah. So the next scene is our first Tarlos scene. Carlos is at home wearing glasses as he's reading a tablet at the dining room table, right?
Yeah, if that's what you want to call it.
And TK gets home from his meeting, and Carlos gets up and goes to greet him at the door and asks him how the meeting went. TK's like, a lot like last night and the 6 before that. And Carlos hugs him and says, you have any idea how proud I am of you? And TK says, for going to a meeting, which we knew he was going to be doing. And Carlos is like, for going to a few more than that, 90 meetings in 90 days is no joke, TK. So we know now that it's been 90 days, so 3 months since this happened with Sadie.
Thank God, because honestly,
Yeah.
like some people were mad that we didn't see it. I'm like honestly so like glad we didn't, because that would have been so traumatizing to have seen the right after.
Yeah.
I feel like the only right after we really needed was that scene with them on the bedroom
Exactly.
floor. I like, would I have fully protested having more? No, of course not. Like scenes, but I'm glad they're doing this. I'm glad we're
Yeah.
seeing them on the path to healing
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
rather than just getting started.
Right. Because I also feel like the scenes we did get in that episode were enough. Like the part where they're sitting on the floor, and then
Yeah.
also like TK saying he's back at day one, like that was already like enough emotion that I like
Right. It's true. Yeah.
needed.
Yeah.
So I was glad that they had been like
Right.
how they did it.
And you know, TK admits that he loves going to them, the meetings, but he doesn't like why he has to. And Carlos is like, yeah, I know, me too. And TK's like, you know, how Sadie stole a year of his sobriety. You know, and the other times TK had relapsed, it was on him, but this is the first time it was taken away from him. So it's a little different for him, which understandably, I mean, it's ODing because you want to is one thing. ODing because somebody forced you to or did it behind your back is completely different. Your body doesn't know it, like we've talked about last time.
Right. Yeah. And like he said, like he didn't have an option. Like it wasn't his choice.
No.
And stuff, especially since we saw in like episode 8 that he thought about going there, but then he didn't.
Right.
And the fact that this happened like
Yeah.
maybe a few weeks later.
Right.
Yeah.
And Carlos mentions how he was reading an article online, which was so cute for him to be like,
that was like
doing research. And I'm like, oh my God, he wants to help.
Of course.
And Carlos was sharing what he'd found was that, you know, they say it's best not to dwell on the people connected to the relapse, no matter what the reason was, which makes sense. Because I mean, yeah, you can put your anger there, but you can't really focus on that because what's done is done. So you just have to move forward and yes, you can blame Sadie, because you can totally blame Sadie. She deserves it. At some point, you have to just keep moving on and address your life now and take care of yourself, which TK is doing. And I think it's awesome. Like, I'm proud of him for, you know, after 90 days. Like, that's awesome. You know, some people would go every once, but he's going every day.
Because he's determined to get that back. He was so proud of himself.
Yeah.
And you know, yes, you always need to remember it wasn't you, but you can't dwell on the circumstances because that's not healing process. So yes, he can always blame Sadie for that. He should, just so like, you know, he remembers that wasn't him, because occasionally you're going to need those days to remember. But I agree, like, need to move on. And it'd be and this is one reason why I'm glad we're further ahead of time. It'd be one thing to be saying that closer to the time. That's no point. Anyone should be moving on.
Right.
But there's been a little bit of time. And so, you know, they're further along in the process.
Like how TK, okay, so I like that he addresses this Cooper situation right away, because he's like, you know, he's like, yeah, Cooper said the same thing. And Carlos is kind of like, Cooper who? Like, who? Who's Cooper?
I think
he's like, his name's been popping up lately, is what he said, something like that.
Yes.
And TK's like, oh, he's been coming to meetings to support me. And Carlos is like, well, I'd be down to support you if you want me to come to meetings too. So, and TK's like, oh, I appreciate it. And
we Carlos, know he would in a heartbeat.
Right. And Carlos starts taking stuff out of the refrigerator. Okay, so people were complaining about the way, like, where certain things were in the refrigerator. So I'm like, guys, come on. It's a refrigerator.
People are like, Carlos is a control freak. Oh my God, why does he have the pickles next to, I forget what the other item was.
Orange juice,
yeah, because I told you guys
maybe it's an alphabetical order.
Maybe there's no order. You ever think of that?
Maybe it's the only way
like fit. You organize your refrigerators.
Maybe TK
not none, but many.
Like, who knows? Who cares?
Yeah, who cares?
Cares.
Like, and so Carlos kind of starts pulling stuff out of the fridge to make, I guess, put dinner together. So he apparently made dinner and then put it away because TK wasn't home. And TK's like, oh, I already ate. And Carlos is like, you can't live on. I had to laugh at this line because Carlos is like, TK, you can't live on AA donuts alone. And I'm like, coming from a cop? Sorry, it's a stereotype.
It's such a bad stereotype.
I know. I'm just like, and Carlos is not one of those, but it's just
I
like,
don't
can't
think.
help it.
Okay, if I'm being honest, yeah, Carlos is definitely not one of those types. For sure, not. Like, absolutely not.
Yeah. So, and then TK's like, no, he's like, he and Cooper went out and had omelets and hash browns after they went out to talk after the meeting. Carlos is like, oh, there's that name again. And TK's like, yeah, I asked him to be my sponsor. And he'd been, so what we've learned, which is actually some cool information that we didn't know. When TK moved from New York, he never got another one. He never got another sponsor. He'd been kind of avoiding it, but since everything happened, he decided it was probably a good idea to have one. So he's asked Cooper to be his sponsor, which I think is when I first got a glimpse from Carlos that he might have a little bit of jealousy there, but it's hard to tell.
I don't think this is when it came up. I don't think this is when the jealousy came up. I don't think it really came up until he actually met Cooper. I think he's more like, who is this Cooper? Like,
right.
Like who, like his name's popping up. I kind of want to know more about him. And I think Carlos is more like just wanting more information than being jealous at this point, because he really doesn't know much. Like his name has probably just been popping up within the last couple of weeks or something.
Yeah.
So Carlos asks him about Cooper or something, and TK mentions that Cooper's been sober since he could legally drink or walk into a bar, which is kind of like, whoa, okay.
See,
I mean, there are lots of teen addicts.
Yeah, which actually, like, TJ and I were talking about this today. So, like, if anybody watches the show Love Victor, there's a character on that show who was, like, basically an alcoholic in high school. And actually, TJ and I were like, okay, he looks a lot like him. And I'm like, don't say that. Like, let's not go there. Because we definitely have our feelings about Cooper. And stuff. But it's, and so I was like, oh, yeah, I can totally, like, prove like that, like that's basically what Cooper's story is, because that was the only thing that makes sense. Also, when he says, tell me about Cooper, my mind was like, wow, he has 4 legs.
Yeah, really.
I have a dog named Cooper, so I was like, and honestly,
you call him Coop too, so whenever
so when he says Coop later, I'm like, that's my dog.
Yeah, and so you could definitely tell Carlos was trying to be supportive but also suspicious, which honestly, after everything that's happened to him, I totally understand him being suspicious.
I think I don't know if I necessarily would say suspicious, but I think he's unsure.
That
he doesn't know anything about like this person in TK's life. He only knows what TK's telling him. And it's obviously someone who's rapidly going to be someone big in his life. And I'm not implying anything other than the sponsorship, okay? So people get that out of your heads. But like, just saying. But like rapidly going, and Carlos is still trying to find his footing in the situation.
Yeah,
so
I think that's...
when you have a new situation, a rapidly changing situation, and someone else gets thrown in the mix, and you haven't even met this other person, you don't know what area to walk on.
Right.
Yeah, you don't.
Like, I think I'd only call Carlos unsure at this point, because he wants to be good enough for TK. And I think he doesn't quite know yet. Does not necessarily matter of like good enough or enough necessarily.
Right. Yeah. And he's trying to figure out like what it's like living with an addict. And this is something he's never, even though he has lived with an addict for say maybe like a year-ish, counting out, that little bit of time where they didn't live together. So I think he's like still trying to figure that out. And I feel like this relapse is kind of like him trying to navigate like this situation.
And I think Carlos is looking up stuff online, so I think he has a little fear of missing out. He's missing out on a piece of TK that he wants to have, but TK's not really giving him. I think he's just trying to like help any way he can.
I think it's like he wants to help more than like fearing missing something. I think it's more like he wants to help and he can't.
Yeah. And TK continues on talking, and he does make a good point, and I can understand where TK is coming from on this one, and even Cooper, but he says Cooper had mentioned that maybe the reason why TK has so much anxiety over this relapse is because this is the first time that he's doing this without his mom in his life, because she's, since passed, so, and all the other times she was at least alive, which gives, Carlos kind of, goes to support TK, and he's like, I can't imagine, how much hard this must be for you. And I don't know. I love this scene. And it's like, it's hard because we talk about it and everyone's like, oh my God, it's like flirting. But it's serious though. Like, and even Carlos is trying to, encourage him to, like, I'll go to a meeting. I'll, whatever he needs, he's there for. And which is awesome because how many relationships have ended because of drugs and alcohol and this kind of stuff? Like, TK better keep him, it better not be any more tension because I can't handle any more of this.
See, like, this episode was like not really, I wouldn't classify as tension. I think a lot of people were expecting heavy stuff. I mean, I was expecting heavier stuff than we got, like blowout
me too
stuff, because that's what like people were hinting at, saying, oh, like things are going to be like this, and I'm like, that, like, yes, we did deal with like some like heavier stuff, but I was expecting it to be heavier than what we already got in this episode.
Yeah. And then TK is kind of like shifting from like, oh, thank you and everything, to like you're so sweet, reading articles with your adorable glasses, waiting for him to eat dinner. Carlos is like, I just want you to know I'm always here for you. He's like, I know I'm not in the program, but if there's anything you ever need to get off your chest. And Carlos, TK, I mean, there is something that I want to get off your chest. And Carlos is like, please don't say my shirt. And TK's like, it's your shirt.
The way that all happened. But like, Carlos is just trying to be serious and be supportive, and TK's just like, I want to take your shirt off.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, mood TK, but also
I'd be like, put your glasses back on and then take your because I'm sure TK would do that too.
I'm sure, but like, I think at this point he already taken his glasses off, so there was nothing to say about that.
Yeah, he had taken off the. Okay, yeah. So this is scene one of Tarlos that we get. We got many scenes of Tarlos, and they're all in the loft, which was good because I'm glad we get some domesticated, like at home Tarlos. They're not on shift.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And then so our next scene is Tommy at her grief group.
So I forget his name. Oh, Morris. Morris is his name. I couldn't remember his name.
Honestly, I never thought that would be his name.
So yeah, Morris is like telling a story about his wife to the group, and during this there's this woman that's sitting next to Tommy. Her name's Blanca, and she keeps telling Tommy about how sexy he is and like stuff, and like she's basically hinting that Tommy should, like, maybe should ask him out or something during this whole meeting while he's trying to tell a story about his wife and stuff.
His dead
like,
wife.
His dead wife. Well, we all know that she's dead because this is a grief group.
Right.
It's still like
maybe not the time or place. Yeah. And so then Tommy's just like trying to like be like, okay, and then he's like, he continues the story, and then it gets to the end, and she's like, oh, and he's funny too. And so after is when after is like when she's loading up her plate with all the sweets in her, and Tommy's like, don't you think you're overdoing it? And she's like, I don't have a figure to watch, like, for anybody. My husband's dead.
Right. And I did think that was funny.
And Tommy's like, I'm more worried about your hyperglycemic shock. And then the guy comes over asking why they were laughing, and Blanca just blurts out that Tommy thinks he's sexy, and Tommy's just so embarrassed. And this scene kind of made me cringe in this part.
Right.
I was just like, oh dear, no, and stuff. And like oh no, like this that happened. And he like walks away, or like he leaves. But then he comes back like a minute later, and like before that, she's like, oh, why didn't you ask him out? Like, blah, blah, blah. And then he comes back, and Tommy's just like, yes, And so they go out, or they're going out on a date. And I'm just like, okay. Like, I honestly like that, like, this is the grief, like the guy from the date is from the grief group, because nobody that hasn't lost somebody, especially a spouse, will not understand. And I think if she had dated somebody, especially going on a first date, if she had dated somebody that had never lost a spouse, I think it would have been a lot harder for her, especially if she were to get emotional or talk about him. Like, they wouldn't understand if she brought up her husband and stuff. So like, I like that that's where they went with that kind of storyline.
Yeah, and that's kind of what's featured in this whole episode is her struggle with getting back into dating and wondering if it's the right time, if it's too soon. And I don't know, I know a lot of people were like, I'm not ready for Tommy to date. I'm like,
me either.
It's been like a year and some change. I know everybody grieves differently, so I don't know. I think it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think
like, oh no, sorry. Go on, Katie.
I think it's important for her to get back out there, even if the first date isn't successful.
Right.
But that doesn't mean she has to, like, she can go on a first date and be like, it's not time, and then change her mind and then do it on her terms. But I think it's important for her, even since it has been just about a year, to get back out there.
I mean, like, part of me gets it because it does feel, maybe because we don't often touch on her grieving, that it does feel a little fast, but not in a bad way. Just like, oh, wait, it's been this X amount of time. So, like, I don't think it's too soon. It feels soon, but not in a negative way. It's just like, oh, wait, are we already, like, at that stage of her journey?
Right.
Which I think is the best way I could put it. But yeah, so, like, I don't think it's too soon at all.
Oh.
But I think she is going to have to move through some interesting realities of navigating this world as a widow.
Right. Well, and becoming a single mom too. Like, it's not just her impacted, it's her daughters too. And I know many of kids who, even after their parents, when a parent has passed away, the parents dating again is super hard on the kids.
Yeah.
Because there's always the kids' fear of, oh, they're trying to replace my mom or dad or parent. And I'm sure that's a part of the anxiety Tommy had too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I know we'll talk about that later. So get kind of the nighttime. Carlos is sleeping and he wakes up alone. It's so cute to see him like rolling over and like reaching for TK, but he wasn't there.
The way he's sleeping, like when he's just on his stomach. That's literally how I sleep.
Yeah. And he wakes up and I think he starts hearing, because you can hear kind of TK talking in the background. So he gets up and kind of goes to start to open the door and he realizes TK is on the phone, and it's like 3:00 in the morning. And TK is talking to Cooper, which I think he references or talks to Cooper and says, "Hey, Coop," or says Coop on the phone. And I'm like, yeah, we know that is Katie's doggy. So it's funny to have Cooper as the name.
It really is. I was like, hilarious. I was like, before we started recording, I was like, listen, Cooper, if you hear the name, I promise I'm not talking about you.
This scene was literally filmed to give off an impression. Like, we were following, like, it's early in the morning, talking to someone on the phone, like, we know he's not cheating or anything, like, that's not
right.
Like, you get an odd vibe because of how it's filmed to look like, or filmed to see maybe a worry that Carlos is supposed to have or something. I don't know. I'm think never of the opinion that he thinks TK is going to cheat on him. I never think he actually.
Right. I don't either.
It makes the scene all the more weird.
I think he just has like a weird feeling, and this is like his honestly raw reaction. And like when he opens up the door, he only really opens it up like enough where he can like see, like he can poke one of his eyes out there and see what's going on. And that's when he sees TK on the couch talking on the phone at 3:00 in the morning. I mean, if I was in his shoes, I would be feeling the same way, even if I did know who he was talking to, which obviously he does once he says Cooper. Like, it's 3:00 in the morning. Like, yeah, anybody would be like, what the heck? Like, why?
And also, this is also And yet another instance where he's like, oh, he's not just talking to him at meetings and going out for like dinner afterwards with him. Like he's going out of his way to call him, but he's not talking to me. That kind of thing. So I think that's another way of making him feel like,
definitely.
oh, I'm not good enough for this. Like I'm not able to
because Carlos wants to help. Like that's really all he wants. He wants to feel like he's doing something. Because honestly, if you think about it, he wants to feel like he's doing something because he's literally a cop and they both got drugged and he couldn't do anything. Like he probably feels deep down, and I'm sure he felt this like 3 months ago, that he missed all the signs, but really sometimes there are no signs.
Right.
And stuff. So that's probably mostly how he feels. Yeah. So I understand it.
Yeah, I do too. I get it. You know, Carlos is going through his own demons, and so far we haven't seen him have a crack. Like, you know, and I'm hoping we get some of that. You know, is that maybe Carlos finally starts seeing a counselor. And I also think he's never experienced, like, as we know from this episode, TK's never had a sponsor, like an actual sponsor, this entire time he's been in Texas. So Carlos has never witnessed him picking up the phone at odd hours of the day, calling this person just randomly to talk to him. And,
which isn't unusual for like a sponsorship like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the point is the sponsor will answer the phone when person calls, because the point is the person's probably calling because they have this urge to use and they know they can't. So they're going to call their sponsor and talk themselves out of it, or for whatever reason. So I think Carlos is just starting to learn more about the program and what it entails. And I think it's hard for him because, like we know, he's kind of a control freak and he likes to help people, and he's seeing his boyfriend, the person that he loves the most, and he can't help him the way, you know, or he's trying to, and TK's not really opening him up, you know. And so
and if you saw his face, like especially like in the end, he looks so hurt. Like, and that's valid. Like some people were like saying, oh, Carlos is being petty. Like, okay, unless you've been through the situation, shut your mouth.
Yeah, he's not being petty. He's allowed to have his own feelings, and
they're
he's allowed
to have their own feelings.
Yeah.
Like, come on, people.
TK's just more familiar with the program because he's been in it before.
And I think part of him isn't considering that maybe Carlos won't know. And that's not his fault necessarily. Right. That's just, you know, maybe him just not really thinking it through. Like, think of it from Carlos's perspective as someone who hasn't had someone go through this before.
Right.
Because he has to deal with his own shit, you know? So he's not really able to spare a lot of thoughts. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, just practical.
Of course.
Yeah. So the next day we get pillow talk, but not of the TK and Carlos variety, which I would have just skipped over if I didn't know that was coming. And it's Owen and Catherine.
Really don't. We don't. Like, I'm sure nobody actually cares about this. And I know we mentioned this when we were talking about it. Well, at least it's better than the Owen and Gwen. I mean, it's only
I did bring that up.
It's only I'm sorry, but it's only slightly better. Like, we'd rather see Carlos, and that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Honestly, I didn't care seeing them like this. I'm maybe the only one of us who didn't, but I'm just kind of like, okay, like clearly they had some fun the night before, like, but that's fine. It doesn't have the same level of weirdness as the Gwen Owen situation. It's like they're a couple in their like 40s and 50s. Of course they're gonna fucking have sex. I don't care.
Okay. Let's just put it this way. If any other couple that's not Carlos were to have the scene, I'd rather it be Grace and Judd. If I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Fair.
I don't know. Like, I just
like that's valid. Right. Like, there is a sense of oddness I can't even explain, but also at the same time, I just like I don't know. So that's just all I'm saying. But
so they have like a brief conversation. Catherine gets called into work early about some drama that's going on, and she's bummed because her ex she was supposed to pick her cat up from her ex because her and her ex-husband share custody of their cat. And so she's bummed because she's not going to be able to take care of her cat. So Owens offers to watch her cat. And that's kind of the scene. And then she goes off, and this is going to be an interesting.
But like it's funny because she doesn't call it her cat at first. She says, "Oh, but I gotta pick up Horatio," and so Owen's thinking this is a child or something.
Right.
Which okay, I'm not gonna say that's an invalid like response when you don't know.
Oh no, for sure.
Context. Like, you know,
I mean,
pick up X so and so from my ex.
I mean, we only knew it was a cat because like the
promos.
Well, no, not the promo. The synopsis had said that about the cat, so we kind of knew that was coming.
And if you know cat species, Riddle of the Sphinx, Sphinx is a cat.
Yeah,
I was gonna say there were a million better titles for this episode. Not even like with the joke of Carlos, but like there were more themes they could have capitalized on.
Yeah. I looked up Riddle of the Sphinx, and I'm not sure if they went with it because of the cat or if they went with it because it's like a known thing and stuff. I really don't know. I really honestly don't even care to dive into that.
I'm not gonna.
But yeah, I'm just like, I just think there were a million better episode titles. Not that it's bad, just still. Anyway. We can.
Yeah, so the next scene we get is Tommy's at home and she's kind of struggling to figure out what she's going to wear for her date. So she calls Grace, who's at work, for advice. She explains, and I love this. Yeah, I love Tommy how Grace is like. Besties. Grace is like, I'll put Judd on baby duty, and I will watch the girls. I will babysit, and Grace goes over to give fashion advice. I don't know. I love Grace and Tommy's friendship. I'm so glad we have that friendship because it's another way to tie Grace to the 126 besides Judd.
Oh yes. Love that. And yeah, I'm really happy more Grace and Tommy bonding. Oh yes.
So the next scene we have a special guest. He's four-legged and he's furry and he's adorable and he's our favorite. Buttercup is back.
We've talked about missing him for months.
Yes, we finally get proof of life. We have been wanting for a while. So
for like every episode is like, where's Buttercup? Where's Buttercup?
Right. So Owen's at the house. Owen's talking to Buttercup. And he's like, I know I've hit you with a lot of information, but I need some sense that we're on the same page. We eat treats. We do not eat cats. And I'm thinking, I want to see Buttercup with the cat hanging out of his mouth. Just, like a cat with a bird, just saying. Because,
that is something that would happen in a fan fiction. And I mean,
Ruh-roh.
I mean, it would have been kind of funny, but
yeah,
I've seen a dog do that before. So
right, yeah, and Buttercup just kind of turns his head and like looks at him like, "Are you talking to me?" And so I love Buttercup. And then Mateo comes down and talks to Buttercup. It's like, well, at least you don't have to move out for the next few days. And Owen's like, you don't have to. Horatio's hairless. And Mateo's like, yeah, but I can still be allergic to hairless cat because they still produce dander. And Owen's like, well, could you just hang out for a little bit while, when the ex drops him off because he wants to get a read on the guy.
Because apparently she has a type.
Yeah, has a type. So the ex is a little bit older when he drops him off and starts giving
he's like 70 at least.
Yeah, and he starts giving Owen like, oh, he needs coconut oil for this, and he needs like such and such oil and this special food and this special water.
Considering that this cat is apparently just Owen, I would have thought they would have gotten along well.
I know. Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Actually, know him and his meditation, his essential oils, and his vegan, and
better than the bird. Honestly, the bird would squawk at him and call him buttface. At least the cat doesn't. The cat didn't even meow at him. The cat, the cat is a whole other story.
And the guy, when he walks in, he's like, "Oh, it's so cold in here." It's like 70 degrees. He's like, oh, but it's a Sphinx. He needs more heat. It's like the cat needs that much heat. He can go, find somewhere else to sleep, man. This is definitely an interesting scene. And Owen was so confused because he had no idea like what Catherine had meant after he met this Patrick guy. And then Mateo, the guy leaves and Mateo just starts laughing, which
Owen's like bashing his head into the door.
And like, what the hell did I do?
It was funny. Like, how am I similar to this dude? Pretty much.
You're more similar to the cat, as I said.
Exactly.
So, meanwhile, back at the Tarlos loft, Carlos is doing yoga, which didn't know Carlos did yoga.
It
I
makes
didn't know he did
sense.
this,
It
but I
does.
love it.
I mean,
I do
I
too.
kind of knew Rafa did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, honestly, what I
So-
kind of would have wanted was to have Carlos doing martial arts, because we also know Carlos or Rafa does.
Rafa's
martial
really into Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Right.
which is funny because I actually know someone who does that.
Yeah.
But I was kind of hoping to have him do that, but like I'm not upset about the yoga at all.
Yeah. I mean, we did see him hitting a punching bag a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, that's true.
That's close enough.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, so Carlos notices how dressed up TK is. He's like, wow, you look nice. Wait, did we have plans tonight? I was
He's like, did I forget something?
I was like, I don't see Carlos being the forgetful one. Just saying.
I don't know if control freaks usually are.
Yeah.
Probably not.
And TK's like, no, I'm going to a meeting. Carlos is like, I thought you already went to one today. And TK's like, yeah, but I just feel like I need to go to another one. And Carlos is like, do you feel like, something's wrong? And TK's like, he just feels restless. Carlos is like, sorry, he didn't know. And I think there was a minute of like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Within Carlos. And Carlos is like, well, you don't have, you can bug me. He's like, I'm a good listener. TK's like, I know, but I can't look at you when you're in your yoga clothes. He's like, I'm not a very good talker.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's valid, honestly. DK does have some talking issues. He's more likely to run than talk. We already know this. And he's gotten so much better at this.
He has.
Yeah.
He's not you can push him to talk.
Yeah. And Carlos is like, I'm being serious, and he wants to help. And Carlos is like, well, what's making him restless? And TK says something, but he, doesn't know until he's in front of that room really how he's like, what he's feeling, which I can get. Sometimes you just have a feeling and you don't necessarily know it is until you start talking about it with somebody specific. So he called Cooper, and Cooper came over, was going to come and get him. And there's, at a meeting at the Y. And
the
Carlos
way
is like,
Carlos says this, because he's like, of course, and says that he just thinks that sweater it's a very nice sweater for the Y, but the way he said it, he was like, for the Y. I don't even know. I can't even do it perfectly. That's like the best anybody probably could do, but it's just the way he said it.
Yeah. So you can see a little bit of maybe some
jealousy, jealousy
coming in there.
This is when the jealousy comes in.
So then the knock on the door, and TK's like, oh, that's Cooper. Can you get, we're going to carpool. TK asks Carlos to get the door while he finishes up packing. And so Carlos answers the door, and he's very tries to be very polite as he answers the door and meets this guy. Honestly, the guy looked like if you put red swim trunks on, he could look like a lifeguard from Baywatch. Just saying. I don't know the actor who played him, but
boy. He belongs in 911, not Lone Star.
That's a good point. But he's not, I don't know, I'm not attracted to him.
I'm not attracted to his type of.
And I think we were all kind of trying to bounce ideas as to how old we think this guy is. We know that he's obviously older than 21, but we have no idea how old he is.
Okay, so I know that this isn't like dead set proof, but I looked up the actor and he's like 26, I think. So the same age as me. And I'm like, there's no way this guy is older than TK, and I feel very strongly on that. And I don't think he came in earlier than 30. So, and I also, going off of the fact that he was probably a high school, had substance issues in high school, and the fact that he's been sober since he could walk in a bar, so it was probably before he could walk into a bar, I kind of peg him to be 25, 26. I'm not saying he's 21, definitely not, but he just gives off a very
in order to be a sponsor, I'm pretty sure you have to have been sober yourself for some time.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah. He's definitely been sober for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's older than mid-20s.
I'd say he's about the same age as Ronan, honestly. Ronan and Rafa.
He just looks younger, and the way he acts is younger. That's why I'm so adamant about it.
Right.
Honestly, we barely even see him do anything, so I'm not
too
sure
worried about it. But yeah, he's like, oh, hi, I'm Cooper. And Carlos like, you're Cooper. And he's like, yeah, I'm Cooper. And he's like, and I'm guessing you must be Carlos. He's like, yeah, I am. And it's kind of an awkward, yeah, come on in.
It's okay, Carlos. I felt the same way because when I saw him, I was like, he was not what I pictured. Definitely not.
Definitely not. And Cooper's like, oh, I've heard so much about you, and feels like he already knows him. Carlos is like, he's like, I hope I made a good impression. And Cooper's like, oh, TK raves about him, and Carlos is like, then we have something in common. TK raves about Cooper. Like, that's jealous Carlos coming out. No questions asked.
That's full on sauce, and I support it. I really do.
That's like awkward jealousy. Like, I'm reluctant to use the term jealousy just for one reason, because it sounds implicating more than it is.
Yeah.
But like he's definitely insecure, I think.
Yeah, but honestly, I feel like saying he's jealous and saying he's insecure are two different things. I feel like it's normal to have some jealousy and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but saying somebody's insecure comes with like a negative connotation. So
you know what? You're that's a good point. So yeah, we can go with the jealousy then in that case.
It's cute. Like, I think he wears it well.
Oh yeah, he's not an asshole about it. So he wears it just fine.
Yeah. So TK comes out and greets them, and Carlos like tries to offer to make them coffee or tea or something, like so they could sit down.
He was trying to get the tea. He was trying to get the scoop.
Right. And they're like, oh, sorry, the meeting's at 5. We gotta go. And yeah, you could see there's like TK was saying something, and then Cooper's like, remember, you gotta stop with that stop with that negative self-talk, and and then there's like back and forth, and then they like fist bump or something, and Carlos, you could just see that Carlos looking at him like
Carlos, the way he's doing the whole in between.
Yeah,
Carlos is dead staring.
Honestly, Carlos, I have been there.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, like it's just the fact that like Carlos is staring at Cooper, like when TK like thanks him for like dropping everything from like the meeting, and then like they leave and Carlos is just like, you two have fun, and then when the door closes he's like, but not too much fun.
Yeah.
The way he said that.
He's like, that was so sarcasm right there. Not too much fun. Oh my god.
Yeah,
it was pretty funny. Like, I was like, oh my god. Like,
yeah,
I kind of like when jealous Carlos comes out a little bit. We haven't seen it in a while.
I do like people to know your mind.
Yeah, that's exactly.
That's possessive more than jealous, but yes.
Yeah.
Like a good sort of possessive.
Yeah. I don't know. This is, and I know there's a note here in the notes even about it, but I was thinking, like, I know it's very common for people to have sponsors, but not their family never meet them. But I think it's just kind of a depending on the situation and depending on who it is. Like, some people who want to stay anonymous because maybe they have some family history and they just don't want other people to know about it, so they prefer to be anonymous. Others, are okay and open enough that they're willing to share their lives, and if that means picking their sponsee up at their house or something, that's okay. Like, it's going to be up to TK or anyone like him to make that choice too. So I know a lot of people are kind of back and forth about Carlos meeting the sponsor at all.
Yeah, I just don't I didn't really like when people would say, well, like, people like some like you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't like, but like you shouldn't meet your sponsor, like TK shouldn't, or whatever. Like, people just adamant that like Carlos shouldn't have met the dude. It's like, well, that's TK's choice, and let's leave it at that, because that honestly bothered me a little bit, because I'm like, oh, that's TK's choice, nobody else's. So
it's TK's choice, and if TK chooses because he wants to be open with his boyfriend about who his sponsor is, he can do that. And I think it also shows some growth on TK's part to be open with Carlos like he is. Like, TK could have easily just met him somewhere or met him downstairs.
Right, exactly. Like, there was a reason why he came up. He wanted Carlos to meet him, especially after he probably had been talking about him for weeks, and Carlos heard the name a lot. He probably got the vibe that Carlos might want to meet him,
and
at least know who his boyfriend's like, whose boyfriend's sponsor is, to get a vibe.
And it's funny too, because we were talking, and the way the synopsis was mentioned was that Carlos was surprised when he met TK's sponsor. So we all kind of like were theorizing that it was someone Carlos had been like knew or had arrested or was in a family. So, and it's so far none of that.
It wasn't. I am so glad it wasn't, because honestly, that would have been unnecessary drama that we didn't need. And I get why, like, people are like, they so misled us. And I mean, maybe a little bit, but like, I think he's surprised because he probably had a different picture in his head, like I did, that like the sponsor would be maybe older or like different than he actually was.
Yeah.
He probably did think.
The synopsis made it sound. I never thought he was going to be older. I knew they were going to bring that in. No, I never did. I knew they were going to bring this angle in, or at least imply an angle, so at least the fans would start going on about this angle. I knew they were going to bring that, but he's still not what I expected.
Yeah, I feel like Carlos though just thought he was older, not the synopsis.
Yeah, maybe. I will say I was not expecting someone who was going to be the absolute opposite of both of them. Just look wise.
Oh, I was trying to figure out
like opposite how, like okay.
Look wise. They are opposite.
Yeah, he's interesting to say the least.
Yeah, right. And so before we get more of that, we go into Owen again, and this time he's invited Judd over, or Judd just came over.
Think he called Judd because he needs a little advice. You know how that happens every so often.
Owen. Yeah. So Judd gets there and he's got Charlie, which is so cool. I was like, Daddy Judd, love it. And he comes and he's like, man, it's so warm in here. And he's like, oh, I'm cat sitting for Catherine's cat. And he points to the cat on the counter in his like little bed. And Judd's like, oh, I'm sorry. Is he sick?
Yeah, I think
no, just cold.
Yeah,
it doesn't have the
Yeah.
Oh no, the cat. I'm sorry, but the cat's so ugly. So Judd's face. He's just like,
oh. And then Owen's like, he's supposed to look like that. He's hairless. I was like, well, okay. And then Owen goes into his like freak out of Owen mentions how Catherine's ex was older and he's trying to get advice on like what that means because she said she had a type and that Owen would relate to her ex. And Judd's like, talking about like how, some women prefer older guys.
The day olds, as he says.
The day olds. And like, Owen's, oh yeah.
This is when this is like the start of like Owen kind of digging a hole, and he's talking about how they have a bit of an age difference, so I'm thinking that's like 5 years at the lowest, 10 years at the maximum, just because when you
don't say that,
because you don't say you're a bit like she's a bit younger than me if it's just a few years. Even 5 is kind of pushing it, but I feel like it has to be like at least 10 years, because like that would make the most sense. And I could see her being like 40-ish. I feel like that would make sense. But this scene takes a whole other turn.
Yeah, it gets cringy because, we've met Patrick, quote unquote Patrick, which we think is Patrick. Her ex. Yeah. Old Patrick.
They really make it look that way.
Yeah. So then Judd gives him some, new fatherly advice.
I have some
issues to say it. And Judd's like thinking she might have a daddy, daddy thing. And then like Charlie starts to fuss, so he picks Charlie up, snuggling her and talking to her, oh, daddy's here. And you can see just Owen, like you can get him, like he's cringing. He's like freaking out. I was like, Owen, you're digging yourself a bigger hole.
That's
I might save my rant on this until we get to the bad scene where this comes in.
That's probably wise.
Right.
That starts here.
This
that you all got to hear the glory of on Tuesday. Well, it's nice like that.
This honestly was a pointless scene. Just, I love the Judd part, but
it made everything worse.
Yeah.
I love Charlie and Judd, obviously.
I think I think like half of his advice wasn't like terrible. But it could have been better. It could have been better.
Given the information Owen had, yes, you're right. It was not terrible, but it could have been better. I agree. So moving on to Tommy and Grace. Tommy is trying on an outfit and she hasn't come out to show Grace anything she's put on. So she can't really give her advice. So then finally she comes out and shows off she's beautiful. You know, we know Tommy is beautiful. Well. And Grace is like, she's kind of like shocked and like stunned for a second. So Tommy's like, well, how do I know what you're thinking if you don't say anything? And she's like, well, it's kind of hard to talk with my jaw's on the floor.
Mood.
Yeah.
Yes, she looks good.
Yeah.
But Tommy's kind of struggling because, okay, so now she's dressed up and everything, but now she's like starting to freak out and like say she's not ready. She's, you know, thinking, oh, I'm going to cancel. She's not ready. She doesn't think she thinks it's too soon. And, you know, Grace, being a good friend, reminds her that Charles would want her to be happy. And if she feels like she's ready to go out on a date, she also reminds her that's just a date at dinner. It's not, you know, a marriage commitment. So it's okay, which is good because, you know, she needs to step her feet in gradually. And if this is how she does it, go for it. But I love their friendship. I think it's awesome.
Oh, yes. I absolutely love it. And like this is a friendship scene, not the previous ones, but this is the actual scene that was actually like great. Obviously, can't compare, but just saying.
And so Tommy's on her date. They're at a nice restaurant and they order some drinks something that Charles has owned kind of recipe for at his restaurant. So when she takes a sip, she's not really keen on what she's drinking, and she starts bringing up her husband, and like they hadn't even gotten appetizers yet.
Yeah, which he gets because obviously his wife died, so he totally understands it, and he says, "Oh, it's okay," like because it is like it's hard, but it's like weird when you go in it. I can't even imagine like doing that when like and then they start talking about food and
oh gosh,
this part. So she's like, oh, I could go for like I always love a caprese salad, and then she's like, oh, I love parata crostinis, and I was like, no girl. I just with my job working like with bread and stuff, and those are like a most pain. I actually had to like package them yesterday, and it's like oily, and like you're trying to scoop them, and like you have to weigh them, and it's just a whole pain. So I was like, oh no, girl. Plus, like I don't really care for them. They're like way too hard, and also a lot of people over pepper them. So I'm just not a fan. So I was like, oh no, girl. Oh no, Tommy.
Yeah. And then the guy starts crying. Morris starts crying because was it actually his wife, or was it like just a girlfriend?
No, it was a wife.
Yeah. It was a wife? Okay.
Yeah, like he had mentioned it was his wife a couple of times throughout the episode.
So he starts crying because he missed her, and that was one of her favorite dishes at that restaurant, apparently.
Or I don't know if it was like at the restaurant. I think it might have just been in general, but like
you know, he starts sharing. He gets emotional, so Tommy offers him a tissue, which just happened to be something that Grace gave Tommy to use in case she started crying, which was
Oh, that was so sweet. And like it was just like I thought it was sweet that he broke down though.
Yeah, because we were all expecting Tommy to.
I don't know if I was expecting her to, but like I feel like everyone just was like, Tommy's gonna cry on this date, like that's gonna happen. And I mean, maybe
that was possible. Like we all know that she was kind of freaking out beforehand, and like I would not have blamed her at all, but at the same time,
I mean, she did have that plan: have a drink, I'll be okay. And I mean, same.
Yeah. So we get back to TK and Carlos, and Carlos is making dinner as TK gets home from his meeting, and Carlos asks, you know, how his meeting went. And TK is like, oh, you know, the same. And then, you know, compliments how good the food smells. Carlos fixes him a plate and just kind of like casually goes into dining, you know, and he's like, oh, it's just chicken. And then he goes into the dining room and sits down, kind of has a setting for himself. And then he's like, oh, was I supposed to be cooking for two? I figured if it was 8 o'clock, you and Coop would stop for omelets. Because like no, and this is kind of when we get a little bit kind of some actual conversation with the two of them.
Deep conversation.
Yeah. Which is needed, honestly, at this point. And you know, TK said no, they didn't stop, and So Carlos, he's like, well, I can still make something for you. And TK's like, no, it's fine. And he asks Carlos if something's wrong. And Carlos is like, no, which is very short. That's, you can tell something's wrong.
He's being quiet about it,
Yeah.
very modest. And it's like,
clearly something's wrong.
Right.
When he's avoiding him and he sits down on
Yeah.
the table, he makes dinner for himself and sits down. I get it's 8:00, but still.
And Tilly's like, really? Because you called Cooper Coop. And I don't think I have. And then Carlos is like, no, I thought maybe you did on the phone the other night, 3 a.m.
Sure.
TK's like, you're really mad at me for calling my sponsor? And Carlos is like, no, of course not. Let's just forget about it. It's not my place. Just trying to figure out what my place is. And TK,
that's valid. He is trying to figure out what his place is.
He is.
Yeah.
And TK admittedly is like, I don't even know what that means. Carlos is like, how it means if you needed to talk to somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning, you could have just rolled over. Carlos, TK is like, fair. Well, exactly. But TK's like, well, I didn't want to wake you. And Carlos, is like, well, why not? And TK's like, because, you weren't the one I needed to speak with. And Carlos is like, exactly. So there's this kind of like tension because you're seeing like Carlos is trying to be the person for TK. TK knows that Carlos really isn't the person because Carlos has never experienced what TK's experienced. Right. He's never been like, sure, yes, Carlos was dosed, drugged, however you want to call it. But Carlos does not have an addiction like TK has.
Right. As we know, this is the first time.
Right.
I'm sure it is.
Right.
Like police officers are drug tested all the time.
Sure. Totally. And
I'm also talking like teenage years, a lot of stuff can happen, but I feel like even then
I pick Carlos to be the very like by the book, loyal,
yes, I agree.
Shoes, type of teen. So there's what I stand with that.
TK rightfully so, and then says, well, he's straight, right? Which, so cause I'm thinking TK's getting the tension, thinking that it's because Carlos is jealous and thinking that TK's like cheating on him or something, which
I didn't think that, but the way they were talking with each other in some parts of the episode, they were making it seem like, like they were flirting. I'm not saying that like they were
I think
cheating.
It was made. Yeah, I think it was made to, because there were people saying, oh, he's emotionally cheating on Carlos.
I never.
I
was not one of those people that thought that. Like, I definitely got a super weird vibe from the guy, and I'm not even sure if I really care for him, even after.
I'll be happy to never see him again. I don't
exactly.
Me too. Which
I never thought any of it was flirting. I saw it as banter, like at banter that we were kind of seeing from the awkwardness of Carlos's perspective, because it's like I'd have no place.
It was still weird. It was still very weird.
It was a little odd. But like I'm glad they're addressing this, because it's like at no point is this a cheating issue.
No, and Carlos is like, well, why does that matter? And Tiki's like, it doesn't matter. And Carlos is like, he doesn't think that he's cheating with the guy. Like, Carlos makes that clear, which is good because we needed that. And then TK kind of adds in like, not physically. Carlos is like, look, I know that confiding in your sponsor isn't cheating. It's just, it feels like he's getting pieces of you that I don't. And TK, he's like, he doesn't kind of want to give Carlos those pieces, but Carlos wants them all. But then TK's like, he has all of him. And Carlos is like, do I? And then there's kind of that, TK's like, yeah, you do. Well, I can, from Carlos's perspective, I do feel where he's saying like, do I really have all of you? Because you're not sharing this stuff with me. But TK's trying to assure him that I am sharing my life with you, but I'm just trying to get better for you. And TK goes on with, would it make you feel better if the next time I felt the need to use, I'd come to you? And Carlos is like, you can. And TK shares it. He's like, I know, and I might, but it wouldn't be enough. And Carlos assumes it means that he's not enough. TK's like, no, because you haven't been there, and thank God you haven't. I need people in my life that have. And if that means that sometimes I'm late getting home, just know it's only so I will get home, Carlos.
I loved that though.
Yeah, I loved it too.
Especially like it had been said that like in a certain episode that like Carlos would say something like that when this topic of like Carlos dealing what it means to live with an addict was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I didn't know, like they didn't say word for word how it would be said,
Yeah.
but like it was similar to that, and just the
Mm-hmm.
way the whole line turned out,
Right.
I was like, yes, I love this.
Yeah, and TK just gets up even while they're kind of like whatever you want to call this, and you know, he kisses him on the head and then leaves the room, and Carlos goes back, and it's just kind of, I loved it because it gives Carlos a perspective. TK is trying hard to get home, and if it means being gone for a few hours extra at night or after a shift, then TK's doing what he needs to do to get home to Carlos.
Right.
The last thing Carlos wants is that call or Owen.
Yeah.
Let me just say, this is like the grown-up version of the dinner scene from season 1, because obviously they have evolved very much since season 1. And like if this conversation had happened in season 1, well, it makes no sense for it happened in season 1, but if something like this happened even last season, it would have ended up with one of them walking out, probably TK, because we know he's a runner.
Right.
That's just a given fact.
Totally.
Yeah, and I like both of their like feelings, to know how they both feel, and like Carlos being like, well, I want all of you and stuff. And I mean, people are like, well, Carlos doesn't know this, or Carlos feels this way, and I'm like, Carlos knew about him being an addict in literally episode 3 of season 1. So it's not like he was in the dark for seasons where he didn't know. He knew.
Yeah, he knew from the start.
So,
but it was something dormant.
Yeah. And like TK was like pretty open about that, like and stuff when it came time. Obviously, you're not gonna, the first time you meet somebody, you're not gonna be like, oh my god, I'm an addict. Like nobody does that.
Yeah. And even TK at the beginning even struggled with sharing it with him, but he did eventually tell him at the police station.
Exactly. Like it did come up, and when he was ready.
Yeah, I mean, and this was a very important conversation to have, and I think it was a good thing, good experience for Carlos to realize that, you know, he's got to sit in this for a second and process what TK told him, and I think he'll come around to it, and I think he does, and we'll talk more about it later when he does.
Yeah, it's a lot to navigate for anybody, and like,
yeah, definitely.
People are asking me like, why doesn't TK feel comfortable? And I'm like, I'm not an addict, and I don't know like what that's like, but I can relate it to some things in my life, which I know they don't amount to anything like this. But just think about like going through something that nobody else, or like having a disability or this or that, like having something that barely any people go through and having to explain it because they don't get that. Everyone has their own unique experience on whatever it may be, like it's like some type of mental health thing, or like it's hard to explain to people that don't go through that struggle. So like it's kind of like that if somebody doesn't understand it.
So after this scene, we get Tommy coming home from her date, and then Grace is like, it's only 9:30, and then she's worried that she pushed Tommy too far to go out on the date, and Tommy's like, what was it, there were pilot tissues on the table before the appetizers came or something like that. And Grace is like, oh, Tommy. And Tommy's like, I never said they were my tissues.
Go off, girl. Yes.
So they have a drink, and she tells him, and she realizes that she's not quite ready, but someday soon she'll date again. And so this was kind of a good stepping her foot in the water right now. And apparently he's in her grief recovery group, so she'll be seeing him, I'm sure. So maybe something will happen in the future. I don't know.
I know, you never know, like they get cross paths again and stuff. Who knows?
Next day on shift, or the next day, whatever, you know, whether it's a couple of days or not, there's an accident with a young kid and his mom. I think they were coming out of a court hearing, probably for custody of a divorce, and the mom was mad at the kid because she and the kid had discussed like what the kid was going to say at the court regarding his father. And then the kid did not say what his mom and him had agreed on. So then there was some bitter tension between the two of them.
Yeah. And when we say the kid, he's probably like 14.
Yeah. Even TK mentioned later, he thought he was about 14. And so
what I was getting from here is that he had chosen to go live with his dad.
Yeah, that's what the vibe I was getting, or at least that he told the judge he wanted more time with his dad.
Which is
And
understandable.
I was definitely getting the live with, because there's
Possibly.
a difference between the more time and live with.
Yeah.
And I'm
that's
saying,
true.
I never had to go through a custody battle because my dad didn't want custody of me. But I am familiar with the situation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
If she did lay out things to him to say, I don't think that's really right, because I feel like
exactly
should.
Well,
He's 14. At 14, you can make the decision technically.
I feel like there was an understanding that they'd live together, and he had thrown her a fast one by saying no.
Well, and I've seen court hearings that have done this where I've like, by the time the kid's like 13 years old, the judge usually pulls the kid either alone or brings them up on stand right in front of everybody and asks them the questions. And I think the kid shared with the judge exactly what he wanted, and it wasn't what the mom thought they had agreed on. So there was some tension between the two of them.
Past a certain age, kids are allowed to say who they want to be with.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the judge will go with it if the judge feels like there's a need to go the other way. But a lot of times the judge will side with what the kid wants, because that's what the kid's gonna seem like it's gonna be the wiser thing, depending on. And I'm not a judge, and I'm not, I have not dealt personally with it, but
also the mom did feel like the dad had bought him out.
That is true. I did notice that too.
There was a vibe where I was like, possibly.
Yeah. So the dad had the dad had bought him like dirt bike or something, and the kid, she's like, is that why you did it? Because he bought you this such and such? And she's, he's like, no, that's not why. He lets me have a life, and you just, and I can get it. The sounded like the dad was, giving the kid a little bit more freedom and a little less tension on the reins, whereas the mom was like making him go to school and do homework and have structure and have a curfew and have,
be a parent.
Right.
Exactly.
So exactly.
Yeah. So this is often how those things go, though. Especially around this age.
Right.
Kids want more freedom, so they'll go with whoever thinks will be the less parent to them.
Right. So then obviously the mom is feeling pretty hurt and upset that the kid is sharing this stuff with her, and they get in the car, and as they're leaving the parking garage, she tries to put the ticket in the machine, and it slips, so she has to she cracks the door open and tries to lean out to get the thing, and the car shifts, unfortunately.
Why did she put it in park? That's my whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
She hit the accelerator, I think.
Yeah.
Like in the scrambling, because she kept having to lean over further, and
so her foot slips.
I mean, I get it. It's like probably like just a accidental oops, I didn't put in park thing, or she thought she could get it, but I'm like,
she was distracted with the conversation and stuff, which and so then she's not responding. So the kid calls 911. Unfortunately, by the time the paramedics got there, she'd passed away. And so the kid, I guess, had tried to pull her out, got cut on something, so TK was bandaging up his hand, and at the time Tommy and TK are kind of trying to get the kid to away, and they're like, well, the kid's like, why are you not helping my mom? What's going on? And Tommy had kind of looked at Judd and just kind of shook her head, and then, ended the, so she stopped treatment because the mother had passed away. And so the kid's freaking out because, the last thing him and his mom were talking about was, they weren't on good terms. So, and you could tell TK was being hit really hard with that because he just lost his mom, and Tommy had just lost her husband, or has recently lost her husband,
right?
And her kids.
Well, I don't think Tommy was just. I don't think
Tommy was affected, honestly, other than like a parental instinct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what I was gonna. Yeah. So I think that I don't think Tommy was affected because of Charles. I do think she was still affected because she's a mother who her kids lost their father. So obviously that takes a toll. But you could really tell that TK's feeling this because this kid watched his mother die, and obviously he just lost his mom.
Well, I also feel like he must have been thinking about Jonah, because even though Jonah was a baby, he'd watch his mom die.
That's true.
So this kind of gives TK some perspective, and when he's off shift, he's at home, and Carlos walks in after coming home from work, and he's like, I thought you had a meeting, and TK is like, I blew it off. Carlos is like, you blew it off, which is not recently has not been TK. He's been going to a lot of them. And Carlos sits down and he notices that TK is looking through old photo albums of him and Gwen. which Ronan had said in his live that many of them were his actual photos. I think
could
that they
totally tell because there's no mistaking what Ronan like looks like as a child. So they probably just like took like pictures of like Lisa and just photoshopped them with him. That's basically probably what they did.
And Carlos points out how beautiful Gwen was, and they're looking at some cute TK photos, and so I was like, oh yay, Carlos gets to see baby TK photos. This is cute.
Yeah, although like everyone's saying baby TK, and I'm like, guys, these are like all pictures of him when he was literally like at least 5 and older.
True. And TK admits, he points out a picture of him and Gwen like on the first time she ever took him to that dim sum restaurant in New York. TK's like, yeah, I was 6, and he's like, I'd give anything to feel like that again, to be that happy and excited. Then he tells Carlos about what happened on the call, which was
good. Like we haven't really seen that really happen with them, where like they really talk about something that happened at work like after it had happened. So that was like good to see.
Yeah, and you can see how hurt TK is, and you can even see how hurt Carlos is, because I think he's trying to, he wants to help, but he feels so helpless that he can't do anything. And TK asks Carlos, can you do me a favor? And he wants him to put the photo books somewhere, because he's like, I don't know why he even got them out, because I think it's just making him more depressed. And then he says he thinks he's going to go lay down. Like, oh. TK's having a moment.
I feel so bad, especially like because like he was just like saying how like he would love to feel like this happy again, like how he did when, and I'm like, oh baby.
Yeah, I've been there in some ways.
Yeah,
it's tough, and I'm glad they brought it up though, and I'm glad they had this all wrapped up into this episode, because I don't know if I could have handled this continuing on. Like we'll get pieces of this over the next couple episodes, I'm sure, but like having some of the like real good meaty scenes here.
Yeah.
Some episodes, it's like a meaty scene like this would not fit well in just another episode that was more comedic or something.
Yeah, which this scene or this episode had like some funny scenes where I actually think they were quite like, there were a few. But like it really worked well just because this is like a Tarlo-centric episode, and so obviously we're getting like all these scenes that we've been dying to get, obviously, and we're much needed. So it's like, thank you for realizing this.
Yeah, really.
14 episodes in.
Yeah, exactly. So then before we get the culmination of the episode,
13
we get another
episodes in.
Yeah, we get Owen's kind of next. The scene where Owen needs to learn when to shut up.
Pretty much.
So one, where was Buttercup?
I regard quite out of character for Owen, actually.
Yeah, it was a little bit. So there was no Buttercup in this, but Owen is taking care of the cat. I think he had given him a bath and was putting coconut oil. I don't know, and I
would have rather saw him brushing Buttercup, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, it would be more entertaining.
Yeah, well, for relevance.
I know, I'm just saying I don't give a shit about the cat, just like I didn't give a shit about the bird.
Okay, then.
Just saying, we want Buttercup content. Okay, moving on. Rant over.
So Catherine arrives back, and she's excited to see the cat before he's picked up by Patrick. I don't remember his name.
I found that weird. Like, I guess she said she might be gone for like a day, but I was also very like, oh, you're literally back before the cat has to leave. Okay.
I kind of wish she hadn't come back before the cat.
I know.
Same.
Yes.
But
I wish she'd arrived after Patrick got there.
Because that would have made everything different.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Owen would have been so weird, and he might have spiraled a little bit, but who knows?
He wouldn't have had the issues that we have in the scene.
I know, but like I feel like this is bound to come up either way. Owen always spirals, and he always does something dumb. You can love Owen and hate him, and know that that's just a given fact. But yeah.
Well, and Owen's taking care of the cat, and Catherine's really excited. She's like, "Oh my god, I got to take a picture of this." So she takes a picture of him and Horatio, and then they start talking, and Owen goes off on her about dating an older man, and then makes the stupid mistake of telling her that she has daddy issues.
No. Like,
okay.
It's like, I need to hear your rant. Come on, Grace.
Yeah. Okay, so I hate this term. I hated this term when Judd brought it up. And I'm not slamming Judd on it, except that I hate that he used the term. And fucking hell, Owen should not have done this, because
it should not have.
Some people may have learned from other episodes, but I'll just say it right here. Or may have realized from earlier in the episode. I'll say it right here. I'm from a broken home. My parents split up when I was 13, divorced when I was 16. And there's a huge stigma around kids from broken homes. Less so nowadays, but there's still a stigma that kids from broken homes will not have successful relationships. And there's particularly a stigma around girls from broken homes that they have daddy issues. And it is so frequently weaponized against someone like me, because my dad is the one who left, and both my parents are not the greatest, but he did a lot of shit. Someone would dare tell me that I have daddy issues. I do not. That matter. Someone would still tell me that. It is an insulting term, a belittling, derogatory term, and it needs to be abolished from our language, because also everyone uses the term daddy issues to explain anything, even if it's not that at all.
Yeah.
And so he was utterly disrespecting her saying this, especially without any sort of proof. Obviously, this was a misunderstanding, and part of why I'm upset with it, Judd, on this end, is because without him saying the term, this wouldn't have occurred to Owen to say this. So I do have a little bone to pick there, minor, considering everything else. But I hate the way it was normalized in this episode as well. Like, I don't think people would be upset, like I am, that Judd had said it. People would only be upset with the way Owen had used it. No, it should not have been used at all, because it's a terrible term. So please, anyone listening to it, for one thing, abolish your ideas of kids who come from broken homes.
Right.
We are not broken. We are not our parents. And if anything, we have learned more about relationships because we have seen what can go wrong.
Yeah.
We're more cautious, and we are more wounded. But at the same time, we're whole and we are individuals. So stop it and just give us a chance and maybe get some life perspective.
Right.
And also just realize that this was not okay. So this is probably actually the biggest issue I've had with Owen yet. And this is also why I feel like this wasn't very in character for him. So he went off the rails in a way that I've seen it take much more to do. And he said a lot of shit he shouldn't have. And I don't like what Lone Star did with this. Yeah, I'm just upset with it. But please, for the love of God, people, abolish the term daddy issues from your vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's definitely misused, because a lot of times when somebody's like having a problem with another guy or something, oh, you must have daddy issues. You know, it's like they're using that as the excuse as to why somebody acts the way they do. And it's definitely not a good term to use, because people are using it out of context. And
also, people do it in a way to say that women are seeking out men like their fathers. I'm not saying people don't do that.
It happens, but it doesn't mean you choose the term.
If we have issues from the way our fathers have treated us, some of us are definitely not seeking out someone else like that.
Right.
So don't insult us like that. Don't do that.
Right. Yeah.
It comes from a hurt place, but it also comes from me just begging people to please get some life perspective.
Yeah, I think if Judd I don't think, like, obviously what he said wasn't great, but I think what Owen took it made it like a lot worse.
Oh, definitely.
If Judd had worded what he said differently and not used the word daddy issues, I don't think what he would have said would have been terrible. If he had said, oh, some women just like older men, that wouldn't have been as bad. That wouldn't have been bad at all. It still would have been
a little, and it still could have insulted her. In fact, I think it would have insulted her, but it doesn't have the same weight. So I definitely think if Judd hadn't said it, Owen wouldn't have come up with it on his own, which is why there's a little bit of a train there. So just, Judd, please do me a favor and never let me hear you say that term again.
All right.
Yeah.
But Owen, fucking hell.
Yeah. Well, and then the worst, I mean, it gets worse from here, because then the ex shows up, the real ex, So when the first gentleman that showed up, the older guy, was actually the father, Patrick Sr. of Patrick.
He never clarified that, and they made
He
it
never did.
Once.
Like you,
no one
and
ever.
he acted like he dated her. Is the thing, because he was literally being like, "Oh, well, Catherine always says blah blah blah." It's like he acted like they had dated, so that's why we all thought that.
Obviously, this is set up to lead us all to the same direction. Right. I feel like if any of us were in this real life situation, we would have been under the same like, what?
Oh yeah, totally.
Because we had no context. We didn't know there was someone else.
And Catherine, like when Catherine and him had been in bed and they were talking, she's like, "You're gonna find that I have a type." And so Catherine assumed that Patrick Jr. Dropped the cat off. She had no idea that Patrick's dad did. So it was her ex-father-in-law. And
which is why she's taken aback by this, but also why she didn't clarify anything. Honestly, I also feel like her saying she had a type even was a little.
If she had
this wasn't
said
bad
that,
on her,
Owen would
the way it
have
went,
spiraled.
Yeah.
If she hadn't said the thing about a type, I feel like this still could have been an issue, but it wouldn't have been bad.
Exactly.
However, like the innocent remark made this worse.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you see that the actual Patrick, who is the ex-husband of Catherine, is all, "Oh, this is a nice house," and he's like recognizes the decorating style, and Owen's like, "That's exactly what I was going for." And like you can obviously tell this guy and Owen are a lot alike.
They would get along well.
They would get along well, which is why Catherine had mentioned that. But of course, like all of us were confused, and so. Here, Owen had just had this rant. The guy picks up the cat and leaves. So there's really not a lot there. And Catherine, thankfully, does not go into it while Patrick is there. Patrick leaves. And then Owen turns and says, "Can we just pretend that was all a joke?" And that she's like, "No, sounds like you need to get a new girlfriend," and leaves. And I was like,
Owen self-destructs everything.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Oh, yes, he does.
Like, this reminds me last season when he told TK that he was getting surgery because he's going to be a father.
Same self-destructiveness? Yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, same concept, same self-destruct. He gets an idea in his head. So she had never brought up that she has a type. He wouldn't have been spiraling thinking of, "Oh, what is her type?" after he met Patrick Senior. Half of those things would have been avoided.
Factors happening here. There were a lot of things that contributed to this. Judd's remark about daddy issues, Patrick Senior, which all of us were so fucking confused on. And the whole type thing. There were a lot of factors. However, Owen needs some therapy. So that when this
he's getting therapy,
I'm so looking forward to it. Because he needs it. He needed it the moment. Well, I will always say people need therapy, but he needed it the moment the towers came down.
Oh yeah, totally.
He didn't really have it, and so he's had a lot of wounds festering. He's had a lot of things happening, and so a lot of shit's happened since 2001. But I feel like that was like one of his catalyst moments. And since then, a lot of shit happens again.
Yeah.
And so we're here with a buildup of trauma, with a buildup of insecurity issues, and a lot of stuff. He needs a fucking therapist. And so if he was a little bit more stable, like emotionally speaking, I'd say, he might have had room to process this in a different way and not react like that. But he didn't have the room to process this. And so he reacted like a dick. Just frankly speaking.
Yeah.
So this doesn't make me, I'm not one of those people that this makes me hate Owen. This is not the case. But this does have me go, probably one of my least favorite moments of him. Definitely the least favorite moment. I'm just going to say right there. And he, frankly, he needs some help. And I'm looking forward to him getting help.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think Owen has definitely needed help for a long time. And I do think in the next couple of episodes, we are going to get some of that. So thankfully they are going to address it, which is good because there's several people on the show that actually need it, but we can start with Owen and we'll go from there.
You can only do like one person at a time. Like you can't really focus on like 5 people at a time because like, I mean.
Though I will say like the Christmas episode of 3rd season of 911.
I knew that was going to get brought up.
I'm just gonna say they had like 3 people in therapy at the time or something.
Yeah.
Still more manageable than 5. But I'm just saying, if we had a bunch of people in therapy at the same time, I'm not protesting. Like, let's destigmatize therapy.
Those were
and
all
let's have
like
everyone.
similar issues, though. Well, not similar. I just mean that like it wasn't deep dive where I feel like this can be a deep dive.
And it did focus more on Maddie. So like we had Eddie, and I feel like there was someone else, and I just can't think of who the
Hen.
Thank you. And Hen. But Maddie was the focus of that episode. So if we had people trying to do deep dives at the same time, like I get what you're saying. It would be crowded, so we can't. But can we have like just nonchalant in the background, everyone going to therapy? Thank you.
I hate that I'm thinking this, but this just crossed my mind. Please let please let the person that's Owen's therapist be a man. I'm sorry to be this person, but
oh God, oh.
And I just had the worst thought that might actually.
I'm not saying he would
season 1 Buck all over again.
Listen. I'm not saying that I think Owen would sleep with a therapist. I'm not saying that. I'm just thinking that like
there's a possibility, and I hate that there's a possibility.
I'm just saying. Listen, I'm just saying.
It's full circle.
I was just
the same fucking show. Character.
I was just thinking in my head before I said that please let it be a man, because I just can see like his cancer doctor after we finish cancer treatments already asked him out. I do not want like another one to be like, hey, you want to go out after you're like done? Like, no. It needs to be a man. Sorry.
And also I feel like a man could help him more.
Mm-hmm. I agreed.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this, because obviously a woman could do a great job with him, but I feel like some of his issues are just going to be better talked out with a guy. Sometimes you talk things out better with gal friends than with guy friends.
Yeah.
The same thing can apply to therapists sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I feel, and also sometimes you prefer a doctor that is your own biological sex for comfort. Like this is a thing. And so this is why I think this might be better if his therapist is a male. So please,
Yeah. Like I think it's episode 15 where he's supposed to go therapy, and I'm like
15, did you say?
I think so. I believe so.
Maybe 14 will be like his journey to it.
Yeah. Pass. I feel like it will, just with the content, which obviously we'll talk about when we get to it. But all I was gonna say is that he's going to therapy for his anger management. That's what I was gonna say.
So the final scene of this episode is another Tarlos scene. I lost count at how many, but we got a lot, and I'm happy about it. So we see TK leaning on or laying on the bed, and he's wearing his headphones, and Carlos comes in, tells him, says something, and TK's like, I think I'm just gonna skip dinner tonight. I'm not really hungry. And Carlos is like, yeah, you always say that, and then you end up eating at 2 a.m. So TK's like, I just feel like being alone tonight, if that's okay. And Carlos is like, no, it's not okay. Get up. I mean it. And then Carlos walks out of the room, and like the next scene is like, so TK kind of gets up and comes out into the living room, and Carlos is turning on the oven, and TK sees Cooper coming in the front door, and TK's surprised to see him. And Cooper was like, I heard you could use a friend. And TK asked if Carlos had called him, and Cooper's like, yeah, he did, but you should have. And then TK's like, how did you get his number to Carlos? And Carlos like, I'm not saying I did a background check, but I did a background check. Pizza's in the oven. I set a timer, so don't forget. Carlos grabs his coat, and TK is like, you're leaving? And Carlos is like, yeah, you guys have a lot to talk about. And TK's like, I don't know what to say. And Carlos says, me neither. And that's why he's here. I'll see you in a bit. Carlos kisses TK, and TK thanks him. He's like, thank you. And he's like, and I love you. It was so good. And Carlos is like, I know. And then when he leaves, you could see like the content, like happy face on him when he's closing the door. Like, cause Carlos is like, okay, I finally did something right. Like not that he wasn't doing things wrong, but like he found something he could do.
Yeah. I feel like he actually felt satisfaction in giving up.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more like, yeah, it was exactly like that. Like, it was more like, okay, I like
He
how
knows he
things
couldn't
are.
help.
Exactly.
And so he reached
Mhm.
out to the person who could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through this episode, that's what he's seeing, is that Cooper is helping TK in ways that apparently Carlos can't. So instead of fighting it and trying to beg TK to be, let TK come to him, if TK is feeling comfortable going to Cooper, then maybe that's what needs to happen. And as TK feels like he's getting better, maybe TK will come to Carlos.
I think TK will go to Carlos. I think it's just a matter of time. But like, I feel like right now, even though it's been 3 months, like these are still like, there's still like a lot to go through and a lot to think about. So like, he's not like, yeah, there might be times in the middle of the night where he'd rather just talk to Carlos than talk to anybody else. But like, I feel like, yeah, like he does need like Cooper. Like I don't really want the dude to come back, if I'm being honest. A lot of people don't. I mean, I don't know. Some people that I've talked to, it's divided. People either like him or they don't like him. There's no in between. And I don't really know how I feel. Like, I definitely think he's important. And like, obviously, if I don't like him, it's not because I thought that like there was a cheating element to it. I'm not that ridiculous. Like, I don't think that. I just gave off super weird vibes, and not just because of Carlos. It was just weird, and I just don't need it again, is all I'm saying. Like, we got it, and I don't really think there's a need for him to come back. Like, I don't honestly think they would bring him back. I feel like they would mostly just go for like TK talking to Carlos, or TK dealing with it and TK talking about it with anybody.
Or he may talk on the phone with Cooper, but not necessarily physically see him.
Or like, it wouldn't even be mentioned that it was Cooper. He would just be, I don't even think they would give us that, honestly. Like, I feel like,
I don't know about that. We might get a mention of it occasionally, but I don't. If we see him again, it's going to be very rarely, but I'm not convinced we're going to see him again.
I'm not either. Like, I don't even think that we would, like, I don't know. I don't think they would bring it up like that again, because I feel like they definitely got like what they needed in this episode and what they were trying to show.
Oh yeah,
that was the end scene. So
yeah,
you guys, like the whole episode, what do you guys think?
Oh, I loved it. I also have to mention that like the scene where like TK and Carlos are sitting at the table, that is Ronan's favorite scene in this episode.
It is.
Oh yeah.
Yes, but I loved it. Like, I mean, I will never say no to a Carlos episode, so
of course not.
Right.
Of course not. None of us will. I'm pretty sure like nobody would, except for those like few haters on Facebook, but they don't count.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This was an awesome episode.
Honestly, I don't know where it ranks quite yet, but it's definitely in the top 5. I just don't know where in the top 5.
Right. Yeah, true.
No, this is a top episode for sure. I think we dealt with a lot of stuff, and we definitely have a catalyst for more stuff coming up.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're on a good trajectory with other paths. So it'll be interesting. I'm hoping they continue to bring up like mentions of TK still struggling with losing his mom. Like, I'm hoping they don't drop that. Which I don't really think they will. Considering that we got something here. I'm just hoping they'll continue, because I find it very interesting watch his journey with that. So yeah,
I would love for it to come up, like especially throughout the rest of the season and stuff. I think there will be a point where it becomes less and less, but I don't think that'll really be until next season.
Oh yes.
So, fan thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh yes, we have a lot of those.
A lot of TJ thoughts too.
Oh yeah. First, let me go to TJ thoughts. Let me just preface it. TJ doesn't like Cooper.
Okay.
At all. I think the first message I got after we watched it was, I don't like Cooper.
Okay. So I gotta hear.
So he calls Cooper Pooper, so there's that.
Okay.
Well, that's a definite feel on how it feels.
That's why I had to preface it. So thought it was funny with the Owen during the first emergency hay fever. That's unfortunate. Had me dying. I love the Tarlos greet and the chef Carlos, and then of course there's Pooper, who I don't like. If there's one Cooper in this community we love, it's Katie's Cooper. And I mean that's a fact.
Stan Katie's Cooper.
He's right about that. I love seeing Tommy go on the date again. And the scene between Grace and Tommy and all the Carlos scenes I loved until the end with TK and Pooper. I can't even say that with a straight face. We're going to be left alone, like fuck him, he can leave. And I mean that's valid. What I do have to say on that is my feelings are not that extreme. Like I don't really care for the dude. I could not see him again, but I don't have that strong feelings. Like, yeah, I don't like him, but like, I like that. And like, some people are like, well, why did Carlos leave? Well, because he wanted like PK to be comfortable. Yeah. Like, he's not giving them space because they're like gonna cheat. That's not what that is. And I don't think that's what most people are thinking.
No, I think plenty of people are thinking that, just dryly speaking. But that's not all that's happening. He's giving them space to talk, y'all.
Yeah, like that's TK's home too.
If TK doesn't want to talk to him right now, he's gonna leave. Yeah. And now he's okay with knowing, where he stands.
I think some people might have just been shocked because TK was even surprised that Carlos was leaving. But like that's TK's home too. And like if Carlos was going through something where he didn't want TK there, TK would have left and given him space. And in any relationship, you need space sometimes. So like having space for like this and like being able to talk about like, things, talking about like raw things like TK will need, it's understandable. And like, yes, he's going to give him space. And Carlos trusts him and he knows nothing will happen. And there's no reason to even think that. So there's that.
And need we remind you, the dude's straight.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Well, and and I think a lot of it too. Like I'm not anti or pro Cooper. He's there. I'm not really like I haven't seen him enough to really make a judgment on him, and I don't really want to judge him. I just he's just a character. Now, if something comes up later, I don't know. Maybe that'll change. But I'm like, but I mean, I can see where TJ's coming from, but I wouldn't go that far. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I passively like him. Like, I don't have any particular strong feelings towards him, but I like him in the way that I have no way to dislike him. And if DK likes him, then okay, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. Like, I don't really care for the dude, but like, as long as like he's benefiting, like TK's benefiting from having him as a sponsor, then I guess I can just be like, okay, he exists in this universe, even if we never see him again.
Okay, that I like that response.
Very good.
Because like, like I said, that's just how I feel. Like he's benefiting. Like he's a purpose, I guess. Anyways,
like anyone, y'all have your own opinions. That's part of being an individual. I mean, if you're of the opinion that they're gonna cheat, then maybe don't have your opinion. But other than that,
I mean,
I'm not the very
and if you want to think about it logistically too, the loft has no privacy.
Absolutely
it's
not.
Barn doors to the bedroom, barn doors to the bathroom, barn doors to the front door, and it's all an open concept, which is great for filming, but not great for privacy.
So I would live in that. I
totally would.
Absolutely.
Me too.
But that's why Carlos left, because it's not like he can really retreat to the bedroom. There's one wall.
Right.
I'm sure those walls are thin.
Yeah,
we already know, seeing as he heard the conversation through the door.
Right.
Okay,
so exactly.
If he could hear TK's conversation low, because obviously TK would have been trying not to wake Carlos like 3 a.m. That's just decency. So having two people talking in that room, that would have been noticeable.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So people thought that like when Mateo was going to stay somewhere else, that he was going to go stay with TK and Carlos. I don't know why people thought that. Where is he going to go? There's no second bedroom.
Yeah. Exactly. I briefly was like, oh, is he going to go sleep on their couch? But I'm like,
Probably not.
I'm pretty sure he does not need to be scarred.
There's that.
But TK and Carlos weren't really in the mindset to be hosting right now, anyways.
Yeah, and like
they have their own shit to do.
He probably stayed with either Paul or Marjan. Those are like the only two people I could really think of him staying with.
Or maybe he has some actually fairly decent friends.
I highly doubt.
True. But I think there are definitely people he could have gone
or family, but I also we don't know that either. Anyways,
moving
moving on.
Even has family.
That was just a thought.
Just...
He did mention his dad a couple episodes ago, but
his dad was in Guadalajara.
There.
Yeah, he in Mexico. Just saying.
Yeah, like
moving on.
Moving on. Let's go. More family thoughts?
Of course. Carlos is the best match of 2020. Love Carlos being jealous and petty. Okay, he wasn't petty, and I can't stand when people say that. That was valid feelings, and if you want to see petty, I could show you petty, but I won't get into that today.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, that's not being petty.
No, he was not at all petty. Like, petty gets thrown around too, and like, no,
I just don't like it. Somebody said I absolutely loved it. Emotionally awesome, amazing episode. I loved it. Awesome and so good. Okay, great episode for Carlos. Love them. It was great seeing Tommy trying to get back to the semblance of normalcy. I was glad to see TK's and Carlos's differences. So how they view how Carlos should factor into TK's sobriety when you want to be that go-to person, but you don't fit the criteria they need. That can be hard bullet to take. But in the end, Carlos did it with grace. I think there's just two more, and they're both. The last one's really long, but the other one's not as long, but it's still long enough.
Okay.
We love detail.
We do. Give us it, y'all.
It was an excellent episode, even with the Owen storyline. I am so proud of the growth shown from both TK and Carlos. They communicated well. Carlos didn't deflect, and TK continued the difficult conversation with Carlos and didn't run away. Also proud that TK is not resorting to negative coping mechanisms that Carlos came to peace with the fact that TK seeking help with someone outside of him doesn't make him an inaccurate partner. Carlos had the best intentions, but made TK's recovery about him. I actually don't think that. Like, I don't think it was him drawing attention to himself, but I can see why people may think that.
I see why someone might come up with that. Like, yes, I'm not of the same opinion. Because like he wasn't making it about himself. In fact, that his mind was solely me. He was thinking about TK, and he wanted to help TK, and that's how himself factored into it.
Yeah. Okay. And then
he just didn't know where he factored in once he was like, oh, the only way that I really thought I could help is no longer looking like a good option or whatever. So
Right. And then the rest of it said the scene where TK is looking through the album was Carlos's wake-up call, because TK is in such a dark place. Very important conversations, and TK and Carlos's love each other so much. I liked seeing Tommy and Grace's friendship back. Liked Morris. Loved Tommy talking about Charles. She looked absolutely stunning. I'm glad the Tommy's grieving storyline is being given the time it deserves. While I think the Owen storyline was stupid, it was very frustrating to see Owen blow up a relationship due to his insecurities. I think it was a way to contrast TK and Owen. If this is the catalyst to Owen getting therapy, then I'm okay with it. Some lines made me gag. Okay, the lines that made me gag were actually all like anything Owen said, because I was just like, oh, Okay, we're doing this, which actually I've had a few people say whenever there's like some certain Owen scenes, they have to drink heavily. Which I don't blame you. He can be a little much sometimes. I totally understand that. Um, yeah,
So
but I
sometimes I think Owen's actions make us do an Owen action, as in we go bonk our head on a door. Just saying.
That's more what I do, but I definitely understand people's coping mechanisms when it comes to Owen. I totally get it. Okay, this one I didn't read this over, but it's very long, but I think it's gonna be good. An interesting episode indeed. Love to see Tommy put herself out there and try dating. Just want what's best for her, and she deserves everything good. As for Tarlos, sad face yet again. I could see both sides of the situation. It is good to get advice from people who have been in your shoes, and I appreciate TK is trying to maintain his sobriety and made the step to get a new sponsor. I can only imagine what it feels like to lose your mother and then your sobriety in such an awful way. With that being said, we all know Carlos's nature. Honestly, I wouldn't say he's a control freak. He just cares deeply for people he loves and wants to be involved and be there for them in every way possible. So it must have been disheartening to see your lover leaning on someone else instead of you. The episode made it appear that TK would go to meetings very often with Cooper in the mornings and nights and then come home late. Carlos understandably got jealous, especially because when he asked TK about the meetings, TK gave very vague answer. It was fine, the usual, the same as the others. So I get why Carlos's sad feelings like Cooper is getting pieces of him. He isn't, because TK would be up pouring out his feelings to Cooper at 3 a.m. while seemingly excluding Carlos. But here is the beauty of Tarlos. Carlos was able to recognize that TK genuinely just needed someone to talk to about his struggles, who knew what it's like, and so he called Cooper over and left them at the loft to talk. I love you, I know, is what did it for me. Carlos knows that TK spending time with Cooper doesn't lessen or compete with the love they have, and it also shows trust. Literally, I wish 314 was the wedding because I just love seeing them grow.
That's fast, but
wow, that jumped.
That escalated quick.
On the screen, wishing them great things and really hoping for a season 4. Sorry if this is too long. I definitely like this, covered a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think it's quite valid, and I love that it brought up the "I love you, I know," because looking at that in that perspective, it's like, yeah, I know you love me. Like, there's no doubt in that.
Yeah, which is why I think it was written that way, which some people didn't like. Right. But I'm like, I think, and I almost like "love you too" might have thrown it off. I think Carlos needed to say like, yeah, I know you love me, because like he kind of like said like, I know you're not cheating, but like maybe, and TK kind of brought up, well, maybe not physically.
Well, I also feel like there was a lot more going into that than an "I love you." It was an "I appreciate you." It was an like, you're amazing kind of thing. It wasn't just an "I love you." And so Carlos's was also not just an "I know." It was him going, "I trust you. I want what's best for you. And like, I want you to be better. This is why I'm doing it. Like, I love you. I'm doing this because I love you." So like, there was a lot packed into those two sentences that I didn't even realize before now. So like, I'm glad.
Oh yeah, and I just gotta say, like, I actually prefer like when you guys do write longer responses, just because it gives like a more in-depth thought to it. And that's what the Google Forms are for, because we want to hear like more longer than "it was a good episode."
Yeah.
And stuff. And I think it's, especially for like an episode like this, it's great to get like the more in-depth perspectives and stuff.
Yeah, we love hearing you guys' perspectives. We may not always agree on stuff, but like, you know, unless you're spewing some of the cheating storyline. I just made it more difficult with that. No, we love hearing other people's perspectives. We love bringing it on to here because obviously you have 3 different perspectives here. But we also, the 3 of us tend to think pretty similarly about stuff. Like it's pretty rare.
For the most part. There's like those few things that we might have opposite opinions on, but it doesn't happen very often.
Right.
No. And it's very rare where they're like very different.
Yeah, exactly.
So hearing other people's, being able to read y'all aloud, it's kind of like y'all are on here with us.
Yeah. We want to represent you guys too. We don't just want to represent us 3.
Exactly. So yeah, please y'all give us your responses.
So the promo for 314
actually better than this episode.
Yeah. I know. It's still technically just a call, but it's a little more intense than that. So the team's gathered at the station and Owen is saying how incredibly proud he is of how they handled themselves that day. We see some road rage going on. A man is driving, he's drinking, he's swerving in and out of traffic, and somebody says he's going to kill somebody. And then we see a teenage son in the backseat telling his dad to look out. A car flips. The guy who's driving the drinking and driving, he hits a car, gets into an accident. That guy ends up, they think, is going to survive. He's in the ambulance, and Mateo makes a comment that it looks like he's going to pull through. The drunk driver is, and man, one of the passengers of another vehicle that had gotten into the accident comes up to the ambulance and pulls a gun on the guy in the ambulance, and Owen yells gun and kind of lunges at the guy. So it's kind of like this guy was probably going to shoot the guy to kill him for what he did, because it looked like from the video that there was quite a lot of carnage. Like it wasn't just 1 or 2 cars in the accident. It was nasty because people had been swerving to get away from him. Other people had like bumped into each other to get away from the guy. So it was definitely causing a lot of problem.
I have a nasty feeling someone died.
Probably.
Honestly, yeah. And
it usually happens that way, that usually the drunk driver is the one that survives the crash and everybody else dies. I've heard that too many times.
Mateo says he survives, and he's talking about the drunk driver. Drunk driving, I mean, I'm sure we're all like this, and I think this came up probably last season. We talked about the scenario in 911. Drunk driving really pisses me off, and the fact that this person is drinking as they're freaking driving, like drinking alcohol. Let me clarify. I think we all got that, but I just want to clarify.
It's not like they're drinking coffee to sober up, which is not okay anyway. You still should be off the road. Also, coffee doesn't really work.
And it pisses me off so bad. Like this girl literally died at my high school from drunk driving because somebody hit her and they're drunk driver. I also know other people that were just killed in car accidents in general. And I'm just like, yeah, that's partially why I can't stand like these types of things. And it's definitely been an interesting episode. And I think I read in the synopsis that like these calls are all supposed to be connected. So there's one at a high school, there's one at like a fast food place, and then there's going to be one like road rage, which that's what this is.
I'm interested to see where this goes.
And I definitely think that like, I don't know, because I know like I was looking at the stills earlier, and I think one of the pictures, the guy is literally at the station next to TK and Owen, and I'm like, I think it's the guy that pulls the gun or whatever, and I'm like, okay, what's that about? But also I'm like, I really think this is gonna be the episode where like Owen's anger is gonna come up again, and I'm kind of terrified.
Yeah,
I mean, if he punches the guy, I will not blame him. No, but also, he needs to stop punching people.
Yeah,
that's the main thing.
I think I want to say I saw somewhere that Owen is gonna have a reality check in some of his anger.
Gonna give him a reality check. That's what, so I think she's the reason.
Can someone other than Marjan give reality checks?
Maybe his son, TK.
Yeah. What concept?
That would be nice.
His adult son, not just child, adult son.
Yeah.
I was so confused what that meant for a second.
We had to remember.
I was like, you do realize Jonah's not Owens, right?
Yes, I do.
As a matter of fact,
I was like, his kid's son. What?
I'm clarifying that his son is not just a child. His son is an adult who has his own feelings and opinions and
his son's like a 28-year-old man.
Yeah, with his own drama that he can handle sometimes better than his father.
TK is more sensible than Owen. That's what I gotta say about that.
He must have got that from Gwen.
I was about to say, I think he got some of that from Gwen.
Most of it, some of it. Who knows?
Right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to us and joining in. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Anchor. We're also on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcast, and everywhere you get your podcasts. On iTunes and Spotify, please rate us and leave us a review. It would mean a lot to us. You can follow the podcast on our socials at 911 LS Roundup on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can be sure to join our Discord server. The link will be in the description of this podcast and also in our Instagram bio.
You guys can follow me, Katie, at Full of Tarlos on Instagram, Full of Tarlos on Twitter.
You guys can follow me, Grace, at Ronan Ratha 911 on Instagram and at Sheepgirl31 on Twitter.
You can follow me, EJ, at EJ8302 on Instagram and Twitter.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.